Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, April 8th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. So today, as always, we have a number of feasts. So first off, we'll start with Our Lady of the Valley in Sicily, which takes us to that place in 1040, right? So the Sicilian shrine to Our Lady of the Valley, or of the Green Valley, because the name is Our Lady of Valverde, is said to have originated about the year 1040. Now, according to tradition, a soldier by the name of Dionysius remained behind on the island of Sicily to become a bandit, right? He wanted to steal money from others. So assault, theft, murder, it all meant nothing to him, just a day's work. So he found a cave to hide in, and then would live in the shadows, right? And would stalk the path that led from Catania to Acci. He was so active that this region became infamous as the scene of robberies, violence, and murder. At that time, there was a certain man named Giles who lived in the city of Catania. Now, for business matters, he had to take the trip through that road. Now, while he was aware of the danger, he was also a pious man, greatly devoted to the Blessed Virgin. And so he was convinced that she would watch over him on the journey, right? So as Giles passed through the wood beneath Mount Etna, which is actually a volcano, a bandit barred his way and threatened his life with a dagger. Suddenly the earth shook violently, and a globe of blinding light appeared nearby. From within the light, a woman's voice could be heard. Dionysius, Dionysius, do not touch my devotee. The assassin's arm was frozen by command. He turned and looked around the light. Lay down that weapon and cease this life of banditry, the lady said. So at these words, Dionysius saw in a flash the monstrosity of his life. It just passed before his eyes. Throwing away his knife, he humbly acknowledged the errors of his former life and threw himself at the feet of his intended victim, begging forgiveness. So Dionysius then retreated alone to his cave to weep over his sins. Knowing that he was sincere, Our Lady appeared to him where he lived in order to comfort him. So she urged him to trust in God's goodness and mercy and go to confession. She also insisted that a church be built on the hill of Valverde with the wealth that Dionysius had acquired from his life of crime. Right? So within a few days, word got out about what happened, and the faithful made a procession to the hill of Valverde. Once they got to the hill, they observed a noisy flock of cranes hovering in the sky before landing on a particular clearing above. So taking this as a sign, the bandit, turned hermit, began the work of constructing a chapel on that very spot, right? The problem is that, he started and was working well, but there was not a steady water supply, right? So Dionysius turned to Our Lady in prayer, who once again appeared to him and said to strike with a pickaxe at the base of a rock that formed the entrance of the bandit's cave, right? So the result of the blow was a trickle of water that formed a pool, which became sufficient not only to continue the work, but also proved miraculous, right? And so as it became a source of healing, so many people came to assist that the work began in 1038, finished in 1040, right? Dionysius kept the faith and continued to live in Valverde as a hermit, right? Very beautiful. And it said that one night he was wrapped in prayer when he was struck by an intense beam of light and saw a cloud in which Our Lady appeared surrounded by angels. The light dispersed as the cloud rose to heaven, but it revealed a magnificent image of the Blessed Lady and her Divine Son imprinted on the wall of the pillar of the church, right? And so it's now this image that's known as Our Lady of the Valley, which depicts the Virgin Mary seated and wearing a robe with golden accents. Her head is covered with a veil, although you can see her hair framing her face. With her right hand, she holds the Divine Child, who's seated upon a red and gold cushion. He has curly hair and is dressed in a white tunic, right? In the year 1565, a group of Christian soldiers stopped here to invoke the aid of Our Lady of the Valley while on their way to the island of Malta, right? Suleiman the Magnificent was about to lay siege to the island fortress with countless thousands of his finest warriors, while there were only 600 knights of St. John to stand up to hold the defense, right? So these Christian soldiers who stopped to pray would later operate the cannon that fired the round that mortally wounded the infamous pirate commander Dragut Reis, right? And it's for this reason that a votive offering of 2 iron cannonballs now stands to the left of the altar, as a testimony and thanksgiving for Our Lady's assistance. Next up, we head to Mother of God in Boronyav, Kursk in Zakarpattia in Ukraine, right? So in Ukraine, in a valley between the borders of Hungary and Romania, Boronyav belonged to the Kingdom of Hungary in 1785, right? When Janos Basovitz gave this icon to the Monastery Church of the Annunciation to commemorate the apparition of the Mother of God to a Basilian monk at a spring nearby. Enshrined in the iconostasis on March 25th, 1785, Feast of the Annunciation, this image soon developed a reputation for miracles of healing and conversion. On March 28th, 1893, it was solemnly crowned, and a new sanctuary was dedicated in 1888. The Soviet regime closed the monastery and the church in 1947 and transported its superior to Siberia, but the icon was hidden in an apartment in the capital district of Kursk. After Ukrainian independence, the government returned the deteriorated complex to the Greek Catholic Church, and on April 8th, 1991, the icon and the freed superior both returned for the reconsecration of the restored church. A very beautiful story. Likewise, we can head up to Ravenna, where they celebrate Santa Maria in Porto, Ravenna, Emilia-Romagna in Italy. This is a very large devotion to the image of a Greek virgin in Ravenna, where she celebrated the first Sunday after Easter. So tradition holds that this statue appeared between two angels among a group of religious people on the beach of Classe on April 8th, 1100. This image had miraculously escaped from Byzantium, or Constantinople, where the iconoclastic fury of the New Orthodox Church was all the rage, right? So found by the Peter the Sinner, mentioned by Dante in the Divine Comedy, who would later found the monastery of Santa Maria in Porto, it was then transferred to the city around 1500 and permanently kept in the new church in 1631 on the left wall at the bottom of the transept. And last but not least, also in Italy, we have the first apparition of Our Lady in Basella di Urgagno in Bergamo. So it was April 8th, 1356, when the young Marina di Pietro was in the fields of her fathers, which had been burnt, right? She was very saddened, and she began to cry out to Our Lady. And surprisingly, Our Lady appeared before her and said, "Why are you crying, Marina? This year, you'll see that the harvest will be even more abundant than other years." And she also requested that on the place of her apparition, an old church there should be restored. It had been destroyed and covered with dirt, but she wanted it to be rebuilt. Our Lady would reappear to her on April 17th. So again, that's what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on April 8th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we start Meditation 54, and this one, like the ones before it, is entitled Life at Nazareth. But just as each of these prior meditations has had a particular focus, this meditation's focus is on the life of prayer, on prayer in the Holy Family. So let's hear what Father Ildefonso has to say with our first point, life of prayer. Prayer, the union of the soul with God, is communication and intercourse with the divinity. Therefore, there is nothing more necessary. God is all. We are nothing. God is the Lord and Master, immensely rich, powerful, full of bounty. We are poor, miserable, and helpless. It is then natural, indispensable to appeal to Him, since without God, we can do nothing. And prayer consists exactly in this, in appealing to Him, pleading with Him to grant us what we need. Have you ever reflected on the easy means God has given us to enable us to overcome our weaknesses and to triumph over our miseries? Prayer is so easy, so simple, and yet so effective a remedy. If the sick had such an easy medicine at their disposal, that is to say, if by merely approaching the doctor they could get cured, do you think there would ever be any sick in the world? How stubborn we are to disregard this divine means of prayer. How stupid we are not to make use of it more frequently. Without prayer, no saint has ever attained sanctity. The greater the spirit and life of prayer, the greater the sanctity. They are saints without the extraordinary gifts of miracles, prophecies, austerities, ecstasies, and rapture. But without prayer, there's none. However, you need not look at the saints. Just enter into that school of prayer where the saints learned this lesson, the school of Nazareth. For today's reading from the Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we continue chapter 3, where St. John talks about the examples of saints and religious orders who had a particular devotion to Mary. St. Thomas Becket, martyred Archbishop of Canterbury, had special devotion to the 7 joys of the heart of Our Lady during her earthly life, 7 joys that accompanied the unfolding of the mysteries of redemption, namely the Annunciation, the Visitation, the birth of our Lord, the adoration of the Magi, the finding of the child Jesus in the temple, the resurrection of our Lord, and finally her own glorious assumption into heaven. The contemplation of these joys of Our Lady gave much joy and devotion to St. Thomas of Canterbury. Yet Our Lady appeared to him and revealed that she would extend special intercession at the hour of death to those who united to her 7 earthly joys the 7 additional joys of her holy heart in heaven. St. Thomas composed a hymn proclaiming these 7 heavenly joys, an inspiring canticle which is still sung and recited in many places. Therefore this saint well deserves to rank among those specially favored by Our Lady because of devotion to her admirable heart. I have mentioned more than once the special tenderness of the heart of Mary towards the Cistercian order. And belonging particularly to the heart of Our Lady was Saint Teresa, together with the entire order of Discalced Carmelites. In addition to the writings of Saint Teresa herself, I have seen a book published in Milan by one of her followers, Venerable Father John of St. Joseph, which gives a most beautiful exposition of the ardent love and union of the heart of the Mother of God with the heart of her divine child.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.